Enforcement versus expansion. Tonight, Metro Transit held a meeting to talk about upgrades and expansion to one of their routes, all while attacks on bus drivers are at a high this year. WMTV's Tabitha Bland joins us now. And Tabitha, Madison Metro bus services expanded out of city limits. What does this mean for handling incidents like we're seeing?
Mark, the most recent incident did happen in Madison, so Madison police are leading the investigation on that one. But if an attack happens outside of city limits, Madison police won't be the ones who are receiving that call.
A citizen attacked a bus driver.
Metro Transit and Madison police are working to find enforcement solutions after more than 20 bus attacks in 2025.
We have seen an uptick, and we have been working with Metro on how to address the issues, and that is why we are starting to staff officers through this month to assist in those.
Route B to Fitchburg in 4 minutes.
Meanwhile, bus route expansions and upgrades in neighboring communities like Fitchburg, Sun Prairie, and Monona means law enforcement in those areas will be responding.
Then they would be responsible for their jurisdictions.
I'm keenly aware of some of the calls that have happened.
Monona Police Chief Brian Cheney says with routes running through Monona, he's keeping an eye on what's been happening on buses in Madison.
Especially involving batteries to the operators, the drivers of these buses has been something of concern.
How do you balance expansion with enforcement?
Currently, right now, we have partnered with them through this month to provide officers at each of those areas that are of concern to help address issues with what we have been seeing and hopefully to curb some of that behavior.
Cheney says that it is on his radar.
We don't have a lot of sidewalks here in Monona.
And is concerned about what could happen in his community in the future.
That presents its own special, unique challenges, right? Where we have a lot of folks and young persons who are riding bikes, walking, or running on roads. And that is now shared with Madison Metro Bus. So
the expansion of public transportation carrying not only riders, but risks.
We're surrounded by the second largest city in the state. So I have to pay attention on what's happening around me because it may impact the community that I'm paid to protect.
That meeting tonight that Metro had at Madison Labor Temple, they talked about upgrades to the BRT's Route B, including reconstruction of Park Street, bus stop changes, left turn removals, and bike facility upgrades. Live in the studio, Tabitha Bland, WMTV 15 News.
Tabitha, thank you.